Hi class, in this lesson we're going to help Applejacks get a more interesting front leg that he can move. And we're going to do this with a technique called rigging. Rigging in animation is the process of creating a skeletal structure in a set of controls for a digital model. And it transforms it to be more like a digital puppet that animators can use to easily pose and animate. So we're not going to fully animate Applejacks, but we're going to replace this front leg with a leg that we can reposition by rotating his hip joint and his knee joint. I'm actually using words for body parts. The horses do actually have a different name for all these body parts, but we're probably more familiar with things like calf and thigh. So I'm going to be using those words. But once we get this rigging in there, the rotation will be at the joints of the skeleton. And the worksheet already has some possible ways that we can rig. So on the top part, it looks more like what you would see in an animation, already drawn out. But on the bottom, it's broken down how each of those parts would look like that we would rig. And so once we make that part stays the same. It just rotates at that pivot point or that joint for that bone or skeleton. So let's pick just one. The assignment requires you to pick one of these types. Don't do type 1 because that's not very interesting. There is 2 parts to it, but I would. It's going to be much more interesting if you pick type 2, 3, or 4. And type 4 is probably the most challenging, so I'm going to actually pick type 2 because there's a little interesting overlap. They all overlap with something that looks like a circle, and that part needs to be drawn on all of your smaller parts. So I'm going to start with what I call the foot or the hoof, or, actually the very, very bottom part is the hoof, so we'll call this the calf. And I'm going to go ahead and use my pen tool to trace out what looks like this leg. And it's okay if I don't get it quite right the first time because I'm not super great at the pen tool. I can make some changes after the fact. Okay, so that's really close, but let's do some touch-ups. I am going to move this anchor in a little bit and make it a little bit more rounded out. Maybe move this one out a tiny bit as well. And that's much closer to an outline of that calf. Okay, so just so that we can see it better, let's go ahead and highlight it and fill it with something orangey like the original illustration. Oops, I think I ended up doing the stroke when I meant to do the fill. That's a little bit too light, so let's pick a little bit more orangey color. Okay, so that is our first component, and I'm going to rename that, or I'm going to extract it as a component. It's easier for me to trace it on the worksheet first. It says component A because it created a brand new component A for me over here. And let's go ahead and rename it. We want it to be called the calf. And then I drew it on my worksheet at this location down here, but I actually want, let me repeat that. I want this to be at the origin so that when I place it on another sheet, I can actually see this part. So I'm going to just take it and nudge it a little bit, and it creates a transform for me, but then I'm just going to reset that transform to be at the origin, which is 0, 0. Okay, disappeared off my screen, so I'm just going to reset the zoom so I can see it again. But I want this piece to pivot around that joint, not the center of this leg. So I'm going to recenter it so that my joint is my origin. Okay, now it turns out that that's not enough to get this to rotate. It's still rotating around the center of the object. So what I'm going to do is I am going to right click and I'm going to convert to paths. And actually, before I do that, let's actually look what happens over here. It is already paths and anchors. And if I look at this anchor, it shows me the value of that anchor. But let's see what happens when I right click and convert to paths. It didn't really change the fact that it's a list of anchors, but it reassigned all of the positions so that now if I were to transform the rotation, it is now going to pivot around that joint the way that I want. Okay, and I'm basically done now with this calf. I'm going to build the rest of the leg. When I go back to the worksheet, it did move my calf up into the origin of my worksheet. I don't really need it there, so I can just delete it. It's already been created into a component. But let's go ahead and trace the other part of this calf. So I have the lower part, and now when I trace the other one, I do want that overlapping part. So let's go back to our pen tool, and you know, it's most important to try to get the anchors where they need to be. You could always touch up the handles after the fact, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to press down the Alt key because this is a little, no, actually, yeah, let's see what that does. Okay, it almost looks like a jelly bean, but this will work, I think, for that top part, the thigh part of the leg. And so I'm actually just going to call it leg because I'm going to build both the calf and the thigh on top of this. But let's go ahead and change the fill first. And we'll use that color that we've already used. And then I'm going to extract this as a component. And I'm going to find it on the left and call it my leg. And I'm calling this a leg instead of a thigh because I'm going to build the calf on top of this. So let's nudge it again and reset the origin and reset our zoom. Now that that's at 0, 0, this time I want the top part of this leg to be the pivot. So it's right about there. I'm going to right click and convert to paths. And now when I transform it, it is going to rotate at that pivot point. Okay, now it's going to get really, really interesting. So I'm going to try to be very, very clear as I make the next step. So I really don't want to change the rotation here. I want to change it when I add this leg to Applejacks. But what I do want to do is I want to add the calf. Okay, and adding this calf right here means that when I rotate the calf, it's going to rotate along what looks like a joint of that leg. And I can play around with it to see if it does actually look like where that joint needs to be. And I think I want to make it a tiny bit to the left. So that looks pretty good throughout its whole rotation. But what happens is this is inside the leg component, and I want the user of the leg to be able to change both joints. So I'm going to expose this rotation by going to the rotations ... And just to remind you, I've dragged the calf onto the leg, and I am changing this rotation parameter of the calf by turning on the transformations. If it's not clear how to get to that, I can go to calf in the outline view, and I can click on this little transform icon, and it'll bring that back up. But what I'm about to do is I'm about to take that rotation, and I want to expose it out of the leg. So I'm going to click on the dot, 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 and click extract as component parameter. But instead of just letting this stay the parameter rotation, I'm going to call it the knee rotation. Okay, so this is the leg component, but I have a calf, and I'm exposing that rotation as the knee rotation. So when I click on the calf, it no longer has a number, it has knee rotation. So now I can use that parameter to rotate the knee. Okay, this becomes important because when I go back to the worksheet, my trace got moved to the origin, which is fine. I can grab it from there, and now I can place it on Applejack's. And let's pretend that he doesn't already have a front leg. We're going to zoom out that leg that we just placed. That looks a little too big, so okay, so now that I have the knee and calf together, I want them to rotate together as well. And if I just rotate this one piece, it doesn't bring the leg with it. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to group it. And then this new grouped thing, if I transform that, it will rotate from that pivot point. So since that's the rotation I want, I'm going to expose this as my hip rotation. Okay, let's go back to our worksheet. So from my worksheet, let's see if it works. There's my knee rotation. And let's see what happens with our hip rotation. Okay. And you're welcome to try it with the other breakdowns, riggings, but the assignment just requires you to do one of them. And before you turn it in, just kind of set it at something that's not 0, 0, that doesn't look exactly like the picture, so that I can see that you made a change to your rigging.